Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. My name is Dr. Leslie Phillips, and I am your host. And as usual, I'm in the studio with the producer, Corey.
Hello.
And today is one of those days when we have a wonderful guest to introduce you to. But before I introduce our guest, I will just explain a little bit about the show in case you're listening for the first time. Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show, and we focus very much on topics to do with metaphysics, spirituality, intuition, and energy healing, because that's what we're really passionate about, and we really want to educate you, the listeners, about those topics and answer your questions as well. And so today is no exception. And actually, the theme of the show today is going to be how spirituality and intuition is vitally important in mental health. And we have a great guest who's going to educate us all about that. Now, I'll just mention that you're listening on CIVL on 101.7 FM across the Fraser Valley, and you can live stream the show on civl.ca or listen to the podcast at drlesliephillips.com. And you can write your questions as well to info@drlesliephillips.com. So, let me introduce our guest, and the name of our guest is Carolyn B. Coleridge. And she's a licensed psychotherapist, but she is also a spiritual life coach, an intuitive, and a healer. And she has 20 years experience doing that. She graduated from Columbia University and is licensed in New York, New Jersey, and California. And she's actually appeared on CNN demonstrating energy healing with Dr. Oz. So that's quite the claim to fame. And she was a former faculty member of the pediatric pain program at UCLA, which is a program of complementary alternative medicine, where she performed hands-on healing with children in chronic pain. And so what's really fascinating about Carolyn is that she's incorporated spiritual healing practices into her work as a psychotherapist. So she teaches mindfulness and meditation and energy awareness at major HMOs and psychiatric hospitals. And she also has a private practice in Los Angeles. So welcome to the show, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm absolutely fascinated to talk to you about your work. I probably should have mentioned as well to the listeners that you're also an author and that you've written 2 books, as far as I know, one called Honor Your Spirit and the other How to Work with the Universe. And so we'll be asking you all about your books on the show today. But first of all, I'm just really, really curious about how the conventional healthcare system is beginning to open up to complementary approaches. And so I was wondering if you could tell us, how much is that happening in the United States, where people who are practicing alternative healing modalities are actually working with the health insurance companies and the hospitals and so on? Are you an anomaly? Are you unusual? Or are there lots of people like you that are doing this?
Well, I think there's a lot of us actually now. It's a great question because it is seeping in because people are seeing the results. And I work at a major HMO and I teach in an intensive outpatient program. And the woman who runs it is a yoga person. So when I was talking about the chakras and energy, and everyone knows I'm an energy healer. I announced it in the clinic, and about spirit. People started to wake up. These are people who are depressed or chronically have bipolar or anxiety. And they were very, very open to this because everyone's a spirit, and the spirit in them is almost like listening. So my in was that I taught mindfulness meditation. I teach 2 groups here, and it talks about, I take it, tell them where it came from India, and then the different history of it and how yoga's incorporated. And then when people become mindful, they become more insightful about who they are and what they're doing here on the planet. So the clinic has supported it. They actually put spirituality on one of the service menus of things you can ask for, because so many people are trying to find their purpose and passion. So within the group, I talk about the auras, the meditation, and people love it. I asked them to pick a color they like, and they all pick different colors. And I said, well, this is your chakra system, and this is how this is connected to your emotional body, and how your emotional body is going through different things. And the reason why I think it's okay here in LA is because so many people are into yoga in LA, into mind-body awareness. So everyone's seeing the chakra chart. Go ahead, please.
Right, yes. Yeah. Well, and so is it something where it's taking off more in the areas like Los Angeles, where people are generally more open to this kind of thing? Or is it happening all over the US?
That's a good question. I think, mindfulness-based stress reduction was really started in Massachusetts General with John Kabat-Zinn years ago. Must be almost 20 years ago. He wrote the book Thoughts. Wherever you go, there you are, and he incorporated that into a pain management program. So that's in Massachusetts, on the other side of the right side, and I'm on the left side on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. But when I worked at UCLA, I worked there as an energy healer, like you mentioned, and Dr. Oz introduced the segment. So that's a prestigious hospital, UCLA. So they're really open to it. But a lot of people, when I appeared on CNN, a lot of people have emailed me and put this information on their websites across the country. So you have people in Colorado open to it, up north, people in the Midwest. I think there's many, many, many alternative medicine programs, especially Arizona has a lot of programs, which Dr. W.E. Weil, he has Arizona State, I believe, has the alternative medicine program. So more and more people are opening up to it. So I think I don't know all the names and places, but many people, when I just Google my video that's on YouTube, so many people across the country, Indianapolis, have put this on their website saying that we use these in hospitals, and that hospitals are open to using alternative health. And so many of the nurses have done therapeutic touch over the years, which is also a therapeutic modality.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's so wonderful to hear about this and to see that the world is beginning to wake up to this. It's fabulous. Now, I want to ask you about your books, and one of your books is called "How to Work with the Universe." And so, tell us all about that book and why it's important.
Yeah, so it's actually a compilation book with my book, Honor Your Spirit, and it's actually the workbook section. So that's a lot of people like that part in the book where I talk about how I worked with the universe to open up to the complementary alternative medicine programs, to my work as a healer, as a light worker, using my intuition and mental health, using different types of understanding of universal principles, and how to work with the universe takes pieces of that work of the issues in the book, and they have you do workshops. It's almost like journaling. Mm-hmm. So when you get a message 3 times, as you're not sure what you want to do, when you hear the message, maybe I should be a counselor, and someone else says, wow, you're a good listener, and somebody else says, you would make a good, some kind of therapist. That's a message. And I tell people to write it down, and then to start, doing research, ask the universe again. So I want people to start dialoguing with the universe, go back and forth, because I believe every spirit is here for a reason, mm-hmm. that we all have a divine plan here. And if we start asking questions to the universe will give us answers in signs, in synchronicities, and in messages. And we just have to be an understanding of the universal dialogue, which is intuition. And when we start using our intuition more, we'll start getting all these incredible answers as to our purpose and our passions here. So How to Work with the Universe is actually a workbook where you listen to your dreams. You look for totem animals out in the universe, and that's a Native American kind of modality where you see a certain animal and you Google it, And then you figure out that the animal may represent an aspect of, like a raccoon may mean, to wear a mask in life and to be quiet at a certain time. You see a possum who plays dead, and maybe you're trying to get in, which I had to do. I kept seeing a possum, and I was trying to push this information out into the clinic, and they're like, "What is she doing?" They're very psychoanalytic, and then when at the right time the opossum runs and goes to safety. So at the right time, my coworker says, I heard that you do great things on my body, and then I was able to go and do it. So when you work with the universal messages of totem animals, signs, synchronicity, and dreams, you can actually figure out how to, create your path here on the earth plane. So it's a great book to kind of work with that.
Yeah, no, it sounds really good. And, so often people go to classes without really being shown how to do it themselves. So it's good to have a how-to book. And so how do you incorporate, now here's another how question. So how do you incorporate spirituality and intuition with your work as a counselor, as a psychotherapist? How does that work, having those two things combined?
Right. So I use my intuition to help myself understand the patient. I say I always listen with 3 ears: the heart, the mind, and the spirit. And it gets me to tune in to, because I am an intuitive, and it gets me to tune in to what this soul, because I'm very much into the soul of the person and why they're here. And as they meet me at a certain time and place, coming into a clinic randomly, I can, sometimes tune in to like what they really need. Like it may come up like, ask about their father. So then I'll ask them about that. That helps the therapy go a little quicker. And it helps them understand, get to the pinpoint of where they need to work on. And I only do it if I feel it's safe for them. I'm not opening up too quickly or having them overventilate. So I use my intuition to assess where the patient is. And I also teach them to use their intuition. I teach a work stress group, and a lot of people, I say, did you really want to do this job? They say no. And I'm saying, well, why did you take it? I don't know. I went against my gut. And then we'll expand that. Well, what is your gut? What is intuition? How do you, check on it? And we talk about kinesiology, and it was very interesting. The other day in my work stress group, I was having everyone stand facing north. And I asked them to say, this is a kinesiology type of exercise, and I said them to say their first name, and then they all move forward when they say their first name. I asked them to say a fake name, and they all move backwards. So I say, when you lie to yourself, in kinesiology, it shows you that there's an energy wave in the universe. And I literally demonstrate it so that they know, and so they know. So whenever something feels right and you want to move forward on your path. Whenever you start moving backward, that's your intuition telling you maybe this job's not right, this person's not right, this income's not right, what you're supposed to be doing. So I really train them, and people are very open. I've gotten a lot of great response. So I actually trained the clients to be more intuitive and to open up to their aspect that the HMO I work for is very much into mind, body, spirit. So the mind is the therapy. The body is like we have walking, talk, exercise, Tai Chi, and acupuncture if they need to go. And then the spirit is the intuitive part. So I explained to them that their spirit is, the language of spirit is intuition. So it's not that, and people kind of take it back, but it really, when you speak to people's spirit or soul, they resonate because everyone has one.
Right.
So, I explained to them. So that's kind of like how I've been working in the clinic, and it's been pretty successful.
That's great. Have you ever had anyone who has recoiled from it?
Yeah, actually, we were just talking about the work stress group. There was one guy who was very religious, and he didn't like the talk of spirit. He said, I'm into God, and, God's only is. And he felt like it was a meditation class. So he filed a complaint, and he said, well, I didn't understand why we talked about spirit and meditation. And the person who took the complaint was a yoga master. I said, well, that's ridiculous. Like, you're supposed to, meditation is a spiritual practice.
Right.
And I know the HMO likes to go on the scientific practice, but that's where it came from. So giving the history helps me get out of it. But not that many. I asked the universe, incorporating both things. I said, universe, is this right? Am I pushing my agenda or the agenda of the patients? And what happened is that day I happened to miss the meeting, and I got 3 testimonials, and we call them on the spots, where 3 patients wrote, I didn't ask for it. How much I've helped them in the clinic to open up to, they said, old teachings or indigenous wisdom in mental health, or take me back to the root of my knowledge or my old. So it was a message from the universe. Keep going with this, and I felt it was very, it was very beautiful. That 3 people wrote it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is most of your work in mental health then?
That's in my professional job, my public job. I work at a major HMO, but privately, I'm an intuitive, I'm a healer, an energy healer, and I'm a spiritual life coach. So I help people to find their purpose and passion. I also do something called theta healing, which helps people remove blocks through kinesiology and a meditative state of messages and information and belief systems that are stuck in their body system. So I show them and test them, and this is created by Viana Steibel, who's a powerful naturopath and created this theta healing. You shift the energy waves of people, or you go up to a higher energy wave and shift the beliefs. So I do that privately. And on LinkedIn, I have like 98 testimonials of professional people who have come to see me to help find their purpose and passion, because we really have a spiritual crisis on the planet right now, I feel. I guess we're always going through crisis, but after 2012, I think a lot of people are seeking for their reason for being and why they're here. Yeah. So it's been very successful.
Now, I know that there have been lots of scientific studies now into mindfulness and meditation and and the effect on all sorts of things, including stress and health and wellness, and presumably mental health as well. In the hospital in the mental health clinic where you work, are you sort of collecting data that's showing that this approach is really having a tangible benefit?
That's a good question. I collect testimonials. I should be collecting data, but I'm really so busy. I don't, but I did do classes at the MARC, Mindfulness Awareness Research Center at UCLA. I took some classes there, and they have a lot of data. So I will get the data, and I will use it to help substantiate to the patients how this works, and give a lot of testimonials about the biochemical connection between mindfulness and stress reduction, low blood pressure, eating right, making better choices, enhancing your life, your health. So I will bring that in if needed too. I am part of a group called the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychologists, which is based out of San Diego, and they do a lot of research. I hope to present there next year, and they want the research. So that's my next piece, to get the research about how this is affecting people. Because in the clinic, I don't want to just say, oh, can you write this or how many people have gotten better. But all the testimonials and the shifts, I got one of the highest scores in the clinic. I got a 94 and then a 96. And these are people who are depressed, borderline, bipolar. And somehow I'm touching a part of them that really helps. And I think that's what makes them listen to me in doing spirituality and intuition and mindfulness within the mental health segment. Because you can't make the patients, when they're depressed, write positive feedback.
Right.
So I got one of the highest scores in the clinic. But I should do more research. But when I go back to ACEP, I probably would present there. I want to present there 1 year.
Great.
But also, which is interesting, just one little thing about spirit and ego, and I think it's important is that sometimes when you try to analyze it or qualify it or do statistical, it kind of takes away from the energy of spirit. So I kind of let other people do that. It's almost like me the exact opposite, because then you're trying to qualify something that you can't tangibly understand.
I completely understand and agree with you. I guess I just imagine that the authorities probably want some tangible evidence, or some of them do, in order
Your intuition is absolutely right. Yes, they do. And I guess my score helps a lot.
That's fabulous. Well, listeners, we've been chatting today to Carolyn Coleridge, who is a psychotherapist who does energy healing and uses her intuition in her job. You're listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie on 101.7 FM. And you can also live stream us on civl.ca and listen to our podcasts on drlesliephillips.com. We've reached that time in the show where we need to go and have a break. So we'll be back after these few short messages. Well, hello and welcome back, listeners, to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. My name's Dr. Leslie, and I'm in the studio with Corey, the producer, and our guest, Carolyn Coleridge. And today's topic on Unlocking Your Truth has been spirituality and intuition, and how it is vitally important in mental health. And so we've been talking to a mental health practitioner, a lady who's a psychotherapist and an intuitive and an energy healer, who works within the conventional health system in the United States, but practices her energy healing and intuition in her day job, which is absolutely fascinating. And so, Carolyn, I'd also like to ask you, so you obviously have somewhat of a conventional education, which is where you started out as a psychotherapist. So what got you into energy healing?
That's a great question. So when I was at Columbia, which is one of the oldest social work schools in the United States, Columbia, Manhattan, I started to see a lot of ghosts all of a sudden. My spiritual gifts opened up, and I was seeing them everywhere in my apartment. They'd wake me up, and they started talking to me. I was 28 then, so I was right getting into my Saturn return, which is another aspect I bring up in mental health, and that's when all the planet Saturn is in the same place when you're born, and all your life spiritual soul lessons come up. So I talk a lot about that in mental health too, because it helps people look at therapy different. They're not just having a nervous breakdown, they're having a soul crisis, and that this is common for most people. Right. So as I was working in Manhattan, I worked on Wall Street, my first job out of school. It was draining. I was so drained, exhausted, and living in Manhattan. I was pretty young. So why am I getting so drained? And my boss said, why don't you try energy? So I said, what does that mean? And she feng shuied her office. It was a woman who owned a company on Wall Street, an employee assistance program. But she was very much into feng shui and other stuff. So and she had visions herself, but it's funny because so I went to an energy circle, and I was really like the energy. I said, oh my God, I'm in Manhattan, we get so drained. I was like, this is beautiful. So I got it, but I was traditionally trained. I never really used it. I got a Reiki mastership. And then one day, but I used it on myself to help heal myself. And I kept understanding what energy was. Now people brought different energy. New York is a very energetic world where like you can know which people not to talk to, which people to go to, etc. So I was in Manhattan. I was in a private practice, and one of my clients was very suicidal, and all the psychiatrists have left for the weekend. And I didn't know what to do, so I didn't have anyone to do backup, and she had a plan and everything else. So I used one of the Reiki symbols, the Chokurei, and I sent it to her. That's a Reiki, which is an energy system. And I sent the symbol to her, and then all of a sudden she stopped and said, oh my God, what is that? And I said, what? She goes, I felt a wave of good. And I said, I sent you a healing symbol. She goes, oh my God, it feels wonderful. And after that happened, she contracted with me for safety. She did not want to hurt herself. And that's why I realized somehow through spirit that I had to incorporate this in mental health, because she saved me and I saved her, and I ended up doing teaching at Cornell Medical Center on energy and mental health. I was an intern there, and I didn't use it much until I moved out to the West Coast. And then I got a job years later, maybe about 4 years later, at UCLA as an energy healer, which really was spirit. This is how I incorporate working with the universe, because I was at a job and I was doing this work at another clinic. And this woman thought I was kind of a witch and didn't like what I was doing and was very threatened and jealous. So she kind of and there were other issues that came up. I'm very much into integrity when I do the work. And I noticed that things that they were doing were not good for patients. So she knew I was going to not really report her, but just kind of confront her on it. And she wrote me up and kind of tried to push me out. So I ended up leaving. And I said, universe, what do you want me to do? I'm, a really good therapist. My score there 12 years before was a 94. And I heard God's voice in my head that said, why don't you work for me? And I was like, what is that? And he said, I heard again, why don't you work for me? And I asked my friend, I said, did you hear that? She goes, you're losing it. So she's backing me up. And And I said, sure, I'll work for you. I knew it was God's voice, as you know, your father. And he said, the pay's good, the work's steady, and the retirement benefits are out of this world. So then I kept asking. That's how I started to dialogue with the universe. He's like, how to work with the universe. And I kept asking. And then I bumped into a woman at a healing seminar at my church who's a psychologist at UCLA. He said, oh, you should come be our healer. We just left one. And what are the chances that I could do that? The universe knows more than what I do, but my plan and path. That's why I feel like how to work with the universe is so important. That's why my book, Honor Your Spirit, I would never have picked this up. The universe set me up, and I just went ahead and walked and followed. So, so then I ended up working as an energy hero at UCLA for 6 years, and then appeared on CNN. And I feel like there's also a crisis on the planet. There's a lot of empaths. I'm sure you know about empaths, very sensitive souls, and they're very much into spirituality because I talk about flower essences, and I use essential oils. In my office, when they're having an anxiety attack, I have them smell scents. I have them hold hematite stones, and I do it in the clinic, and empaths love that stuff, and I think they're here to help shift the planet to more kindness, compassion, and peace. So that's my belief, and the universe keeps sending me up and like supporting me in this. I'm an empath myself, so. And I had to know how to get through the energy. The Reiki healing, as you asked before, helped me to be able to breathe and not be so drained and protect my energetic boundaries and to sage myself. I actually sage patients in mental health. They do a walk and I come back out there and I sage them. And many of them say, oh my God, I've never been able to sleep for years. And then they're able to sleep. So it's been wonderful, incorporating these spiritual practices, the sensitive souls. Yeah.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating to me. I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and I sort of awakened like you, had a professional background, a PhD, and all of that, and I kind of had to live a double life. When I worked there, I didn't feel so. It's fascinating to hear your story and how this is all. Now out in the open and more being accepted. And it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm beginning to hear that a lot of corporations are now also opening up at least to meditation in the workplace. And some of that, I think did you mention you work for a health insurance company? Is that right?
Yeah, I don't want to give out the name, but I do work for a major HMO, and it's an insurance company, and they also do mental health treatment.
And they must work with corporations and offer programs to the corporations, do they, about health and wellness?
The company is very much into like the five senses and healing, and our CEO talked about mind, body, spirit, and I actually talked about it in a PR event for a major magazine, Nylon magazine. I talked about that, how I incorporate that, and I think a lot of people are screaming for this stuff, and we refer to acupuncture, and we have Tai Chi, so this, and I teach mindfulness, so that gives me, I think, license to talk about it more. But when you talk about a dual life, I feel like I still live a dual life. Occasionally the youngins will Google me and see that I've done intuitive work, and they'll ask me questions. I say, here, I'm a therapist. I'm not, doing any intuitive work. And it's weird. I think the universe is protecting me. Remember, 12 years ago it didn't, but now that I'm stepping more into my power, it feels like it's time, and that they are. But a lot of people ask me about healing, and I've done theta healing in the clinic where I talk about energy waves and muscle testing it, and then I say, okay, let's all believe that we can change in a wave, and I'm doing an energetic healing system similar to EFT, where we're shifting the wave. So I feel like I live two lives too, but absolutely, it's a little closer than before. I never was able to do this 12 years ago.
No.
Yeah.
I know, yes, and that's kind of, I made the split about 12 years ago from being in full-time professional and moving more into this. But I do feel like very recently in the last year or so, I don't know whether I've blinked and was asleep, but now I'm like, wow, it seems to be really opening up in the corporate world and in the medical profession, and maybe more a little bit in the United States than Canada. But it's
definitely.
It's just so refreshing to hear about it.
it's really refreshing, and I have to say I do piggyback off of Gina. I'm sure you know Judith Orloff, and
Yes.
she's and she was the one that got me on CNN because she worked at UCLA, and her friend was a pediatrician, was head of the clinic, the pediatric pain program where I worked, and I use this to justify, since she is a psychiatrist that talks about intuition and empath. I hand out her paperwork in the clinic, and then it kind of substantiates and quells their nervousness, about it. So, and the fact that she's in LA, and LA is, is very much in, people are into yoga and all this other stuff. So, but, and I really think spirit has protected me in many ways. And anything that was negative in the past where they pushed me out, I felt like I landed on my feet because I was doing the right work, and that the universe was actually getting me to challenge. Because I worked for freelance 10 years, just working at a hospital where I learned about energy healing, because I worked with a physical hospital, medication and side effects and doctors and this and that. And I chronicalized it all in my book, Honor Your Spirit. And then I also worked as a reader, an intuitive reader, and I do mediumship and other stuff privately. Yeah. And then I did energy healing. So, but then nobody really found out about me, and it just kind of like worked out. And I always am nervous, like you were, like, oh no. But now it seems like with different TV shows out there, people aren't open. But I know where I am, I have to do it this, if I'm just working for mental health, I'm just doing mental health. Right. But I'm slowly opening up. Like I have a big yoga chart. So if people are open to that, they'll start talking to me about it, and then I'll incorporate it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so Corey, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I studied some psychology out of UCLA, Barron Institute, which he runs out of UCLA, and they've melded a PhD program. They've melded psychology with intuitive healing and integrative medicine. It's really very interesting. He brings like hypnosis into it. He brings herbs and medicine, herbs and that type of medicines in. He brings EFT, NLP, all the alphabet. And it really is strong profile. Richard Bandler, one of the founders of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Program, we were talking one day, like he says, if you only have one tool in your tool belt and that doesn't work, what do you do?
Right, right.
You can't help the person. Like I've also, I've also got a master in Reiki as well. I like, but my preference is matrix energetics. I've done a lot of the healing, and they're all very similar. But it's wonderful to be able to do like you do, is going into the hospitals and work with people. There was a gentleman in the hospital. I was just in the hospital recently for something, and there's a gentleman there who was so in his head. Mm-hmm. He was so in his head. They couldn't really find. He was 84. They just couldn't find what was wrong with him. But he was, and like I told the nurse, it's got nothing to do with his body. He's here. He believes that there's something wrong with him, and he is going to stay there until he stops believing that. Mm-hmm. And so, kudos to you for being able to go in and help patients that are there. Wonderful.
I really feel like Spirit has helped me, the Holy Spirit, because, and as you mentioned, UCLA actually has 13 complementary alternative medicine programs. Wow. And they had a huge alternative medicine conference last year. I mean, a couple years ago, I think 2014, I was in, where I talked about energy healing to 200 medical students. Wow. So even though UCLA is, I know, very conservative, they are very progressive at the same time. They have the healing arts, UCLA Healing Arts, where they do a lot of mind-body stuff. They have the Marks Institute, a Mindfulness Awareness Research Center that teaches mindfulness and scientifically based proof. And they also have something called Urban Zen. And I think that was done, I'm pretty sure, by Donna Karen, the designer. Mm-hmm. She funds it. And then a friend of mine actually teaches Reiki to nurses there through that program, through that grant. Wow. So they're very open. Yeah, LA's like in a big mind-body vortex in many ways. So it's really great to be part of that.
It would be nice to remove that U.S.-Canada border and have some of those concepts flow up to here.
Uh-huh. Well, I think are you guys in Canada? Is that where you are?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, they have that big ISSEEM, and I don't remember, the energy conference. I think it's more traditional, but I'm always getting stuff from Mind Body in Vancouver, and I don't know about the hospitals there, but I know you guys have better healthcare coverage than we do because you have socialized health, right?
We did.
Oh, we did? I missed a memo?
Yeah, more or less.
It changed? Oh, okay.
It's changed drastically, yeah.
Right, and it's not all, positive, because, remember Dr. Oz talks a lot about alternative health, and he was really scrutinized and went after by some of his coworkers at times. So, yeah, if we watch my video, he talks about energy healing, but he had a hard time. A lot of people are afraid with shifts of newness because they're afraid they're going to lose their own, power or play, but I feel like it's being called out larger and larger. So many people are understanding they're here for a reason. We're waking up. 2012 was the end of, the Aquarian age, Piscean age, and people are getting more into their understanding their souls. You have doctors talking about near-death experience. What's his name? Ebsner, the doctor who had that near-death, and he wrote a New York Times bestseller. So I think that there is a major shift on the planet.
There is.
For awareness, yeah.
Totally. And 2012 was, earmarked as a major point of change, but I actually feel this year has had like the biggest energetic shift so far. I don't know whether you've noticed that, but...
Well, what's interesting, I'm not an astrologer, but I went to an astrology workshop, and she said between 2017 and 2020, there's going to be a major shift happening on the planet, just what you're feeling it. And she said because it's the old, she said it's like the Pluto-Uranus opposition. The first time it happened, I think it's a Pluto-Venus. I think it was Pluto-Uranus. First time it happened was 1960. And then it moves again 20 years later, which ends in 2020. And it is about protest. It is about awareness. It is about Uranus bringing out the truth. So it's almost like we're right on course.
Right.
Even getting Trump in where he's like, oh, this and this, and it's making people to fight and to open up to women and other things. So it's like the next level of protest from the 60s is happening. It's going to end in 2020.
Yeah.
So I think you're right on with that.
Yeah, I know. And the other thing it feels like to me is not so long ago, many of us who woke up earlier about this stuff felt kind of alone. And now it feels like there's a second wave of people that are waking up alongside us, and it's not such a lonely place anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're definitely not all in mental health, because sometimes when I go to my New Age conference, I'm like, that's relaxing. But they're definitely more than, definitely more than before. And I definitely feel like, there's a shift. And there's even looking at the books out there, when I was seeing, it's like there's more people writing about near death and mind body and spirituality. Mindfulness is huge in California.
Yeah.
There's so many of the clinics are doing it. It's massive. We have 6 groups here in mindfulness.
Wow.
I just picked up another one today.
Fabulous. Well, I think we'll take another break. So I'm just going to say thank you. We'll have you back after the break for a few minutes. I know that you have to rush off, but listeners, you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie on CIVL on 101.7 FM. Today we've been talking to Carolyn Coleridge about intuition and spirituality and energy healing, especially applied to mental health and the healthcare system. We'll be back after these few messages. So welcome back, listeners, to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. My name's Dr. Leslie Phillips, and I'm your host. We're in the last segment of today's show. We've been talking with Carolyn Coleridge about energy healing, intuition, and how it can help people in all sorts of healthcare issues, but especially mental health. And I've just been delighted to hear from Carolyn about how much this is now being applied, at least in the United States, in the hospitals and mental health clinics. And so I'm going to see if Corey's got any questions that the listeners have written in that would be relevant.
Not related at this point in time.
Oh, well, maybe I'll ask a question then.
I've got questions.
Oh, you do? I thought of one. So have you ever encountered, in your experience as a mental health expert, patients or clients who believe that they're under psychic attack or believe that they're being possessed by other spirits? And if you have, how have you helped them?
Absolutely. That is actually one of my favorite topics. I have a couple of people I dealt with in the clinic, and is very interested. Their diagnosis would be psychotic.
Right.
And all three of them have had experiences where they worked with different spiritual modalities and principles, esoteric spiritual stuff, which I love. But they did it without protection, or it's very bizarre, without guardianship. And one person, I'll tell you, privately I worked with, because a lot of people have attachments. I believe in entity attachments and energy. Like one woman looks like a guy, and it's not because she wants to dress like that, but I was like, it feels like somebody's attached to you. And she's a therapist. She goes, I feel the same way. Mm-hmm. But there's one of my interns, this is going to be my second book, she talked about her brother who had schizophrenia, and she said that he was always, no one in her family does, and he was always angry, and she goes, his energy is weird, and he's, very violent, and I'm like, oh, that's, really sad, and she goes, well, what's weird about him is that it's like, he's changed, it's like his eyes aren't there, Carolyn, mm-hmm. And when she said that, I knew he had an attachment, I knew there was something, she's like, it's almost like he's not there, and his room seems very heavy. So this was my intern in the hospital at the time. So, and I asked her, I said, well, go home and sage the room. And I said, is your brother sensitive? Because a lot of empaths open up to weird energies if there's abuse or drugs or alcohol in the home. Because dark energies that are lower, get attracted to addictive things like drugs, alcohol, abuse, violence, Yeah. So I asked her about that. She said, I said, was there any alcohol or drugs? She said, my father's an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And I said, is there violence? She said, he used to beat us both. And I said, okay. And I said, and is your brother sensitive? She goes, he's so sensitive. She goes, oh, but he was a little off. He would believe he would see things in his room. I said, what would he say? He goes, a man and then this large being that looked like a cockroach or something. I'm like, oh my God. So then I kind of talked to my friend who's actually in Vancouver, who's another healer. And I said, so tune into this name. And I've never met this person, which is interesting about distant healing. And I asked her to tune in. She goes, oh, he has a hole in his aura. And I said, she goes, oh, you need a real good shaman to do that. And some of my intuition said I could help him. So just knowing his name, every day I would pray for him, and I would try to work on his aura, like distant healing, and I would start to heal it off. I asked for permission, and his higher self said yes. And then I would try to close the field. And then this being that was with him was really evil. It almost seemed like it was from another dimension, I'll have to say. And I said, and I actually looked up a picture of a praying mantis, she goes, oh my God, her brother used to draw pictures like that. And she said it was just evil. So, and this is an intern. So then I kept praying for him, and she said, oh my God, he's gotten worse. But I knew this thing was fighting back, and I could feel it fighting back. Only 10 minutes a night where I was closing the aura, putting in the archangels around him, guardians. And she's like, he got worse. He got hospitalized. And I kept praying, and I said, that's okay. And was fighting back. And then she said, oh, guess what? I became the conservator, which never happened in 10 years. I said, oh my God, praise be. This is great. So she's like, wow. And then she goes, he's finally gotten on meds. He never took meds before. So I knew the prayers were helping. So I kept praying and praying. This was over a 6-month period. And she said, you won't believe what happened. He's calmed down. And she said he's actually going to groups. He hasn't gone to groups in 10 years. And I was like, this is great. I kept praying. And then one thing popped out. She says, Carolyn, there's a shift. I said, what? She goes, his eyes are back. And when I visited, I said, good, I got one out. And then there was another. So I kept praying and praying and doing this energy, putting the different Reiki symbols. And she said, oh my God, not only he's going to group, he's starting to lead the group. The group leader can't believe it. I said, this is excellent. So I kept praying, and then the other thing popped out. And she said, wow, he can actually say my name now and look at me. So this was really interesting. So that he knew, and then she said, Caroline, you won't believe it. It's May. We started in January. She goes, he came home for Mother's Day. He hasn't been home in 10 years. and they clean the energy in the room, and she said that the room and the energy feels calmer. Now, she's Korean. She said her mother used to go to a Korean healer. She said, we need to go back into that. He was stabilized for a year. Now, after he got stabilized, I lost track of her. We kept it together on Facebook. And then I think about maybe a year and a half later, he did relapse. But what kind of proof this is for distant healing, for entity removal, for energy, for prayer, and for Reiki. I just thought it was amazing. And it was such a great testimonial. And even her mother sent me flowers. She goes, I never had my son back in all that time.
So, I do have a belief that, and I've experienced it myself with my own clients, that there are people who are diagnosed with some kind of mental health issue, and what's going on is an energetic thing like you just described. But what, maybe you can help me understand what proportion of cases that you see. Well, I suppose that they all can be approached energetically, can't they?
Yeah.
I don't think that there would ever be a case where you couldn't. But I because there are some people who, I've met people who have a family member who's diagnosed as a schizophrenic, and if you start talking about the from an energy or intuitive perspective, sometimes they can understand it and sometimes they get offended because it's a genuine medical problem and it doesn't have that type of explanation. So I just wondered if you could sort of comment on that.
Yeah, I find that fascinating because I actually, since I have a second sight, I've seen energies. And actually, with one client, I actually talked to the being. And I don't open up to people unless they're open to it. The 3 people I worked with, they all were open to it because they all had done spiritual stuff. I actually worked in a partial hospitalization program. And the psychiatrist was into energy healing. He was a healer. And the pharmacist was an energy healer. And we got the highest score in California, Southern Cal, and then, the whole California for an outpatient partial hospitalization program. And part of our score, we believe, was the fact that we worked with energy. So actually, one of Nancy, my friend, used to do hands-on healing on the patient. She was a pharmacist and do pranic and energy removal. So just having that belief, I think, can kind of free people up. But people, yes, that can really trigger people. But I've done it with theta healing. I've removed blocks off of someone who had chronic pain, and in my book it's called Chronic Ping because she was always depressed. And I said to her, she was 28 when it first happened. I saw an energy enter her at 28, and she, in the back of her neck, she said, "Oh my God, that's when my neck completely hurt, and I was in bed for 3 months." And she was an empath, so she was very sensitive to picking up pain. And then I muscle tested her. I said, "You got something attached." And she believed it. I got rid of it through, and this was an easy one to get rid of. And then she got better. She literally got better. And she was in chronic pain for 10 years. And it was just in my book it's Chronic Pain, but, and some people jump off, other ones are real stubborn, and I actually do outside consultants. I know a lot of healers. I'll say, a lot of them will do it for free. They'll just tune in. They'll say, okay, this is what I feel. I was like, good. Because sometimes when I'm in my mental health hat, I don't really tune in completely. Okay. And I ask Spirit, how do I approach this? With theta healing, what I learned is through Vianna Stibel, the creator of it, is that any energy that's an attachment, you don't even need permission to remove it because they're not supposed to be there.
No, exactly. They're invading the space of the person. Exactly.
Yeah. So there is a book. Go ahead. I just found a book called Spiritism and Mental Health. I haven't read it, but it's based out of Brazil, and they do a lot of spiritual releases there. And I remember there's, so I'm reading about it and knowing that this happens because I can feel it and I can see it sometimes. And sometimes they're very mean to me because they know I can see through them. The light,
I know.
I spent a little time in Brazil, and I went to a couple of spiritualist groups. I wouldn't call them churches, but groups. And they are very, very, they do things quite differently there than they do here. It's a group of people that have different gifts. And they'll go through, they have letters, like stacks of letters, please help me with this person, please. And they go through these letters, and when they pick one, and then they'll pick one that they they can feel, and the whole group will get together and work on this person.
Wow.
It's astounding. It's astounding. And one of the leaders of one of these groups, I met with them personally once, and they saw stuff in me that just blew me away. It was amazing.
Wow. Yeah, and interesting enough, my family is from South America, actually, and my grandmother used to do that. She used to remove energies off of people, and my mother never told me as she was paying for my Columbia degree until I started getting into this work. She goes, "Oh, you like your grandmother?" I said, "Why'd you tell me?" She goes, "I wanted you to be a doctor." And so I didn't. But she said she put her hand on her stomach. She goes, "Oh, I would say this is my healer," and she goes, "Why did you go to medical school?" I said, "Next time, be more specific, because I am a healer." But that's what they call them in there. They call healers doctors. So I think there's something to it. There's a lot of people on the fringes doing it, and we're moving into the mainstream because it needs to be done.
Yeah, it does. Marvelous. Well, thank you so much. I know that you have to run, but thank you so much, Carolyn, for sharing your wisdom and your experiences of life, and for inspiring us and giving us hope.
Okay, good.
That the world is changing in a positive direction. So much on the news, we hear unhappy news, but that makes me happy to know that all of that good work is going on. So thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
How can our listeners get a hold of you if they want to get in touch?
Thank you so much again for having me. This is an excellent show. I've listened to it before. It's intuitivesoulhealing.com is my website, and I highly recommend my book, Honor Your Spirit. And I talk about working in mental health and doing the spiritual work and how the universe talked to me, and how to work with the universe actually is coming out at the end of this week. So it's a workbook. So thank you for spreading the light. Your work is wonderful, and I appreciate your time today. Yes.
Thank you so much. And listeners, so you've been listening to Unlock Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. We've been interviewing Carolyn Coleridge, and we've had a wonderful time. And unfortunately, we have to go, but we'll be back next week at 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on 101.7 FM.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com, where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. Come back again.